Right, okay, fantastic. Well, I think we'll open this session then. Thank you so much for coming in person if you're in person, and coming online if you're online. This session is going to have two talks. There'll be one actual talk in the room and one virtual talk from Derek, who I assume has joined us as well, Rebecca online. So this particular session is entitled Modern Languages in a Global Humanities Landscape, and we're going to hear from our two speakers, I think probably having the discussion at the end of both talks. So first, very warm welcome to Professor David Clarke, who is the head of the School of Modern Languages at Cardiff University, and is going to talk to us about global humanities at Cardiff University, in fact, a personal view of the story so far. So without further ado, I shall pass over to you.
Thank you, Emma. The slightly cheesy subtitle is just to indicate that I am not speaking on behalf of the institution. So this is kind of my view of how things are progressing so far with our global humanities project at Cardiff, and I'm by no means the only person involved in that. This is a project to bring together the School of Modern Languages, English Communication and Philosophy, History, Archaeology and Religion, Music and Welsh. So it's going to be a behemoth. It's going to be one of the largest schools in the university, and brings together pretty much all of our humanities provision at Cardiff from the autumn of 2026. Languages is a part of that, if in a reimagined form, and I can talk a little bit about that later. But I just wanted to talk to you about how we arrived at this term, global humanities, what we think we are going to do with it in this new school, and to maybe offer some kind of behind the scenes insights into how one goes about facing a very challenging institutional context, and thinking sort of creatively about finding a home for humanities more broadly, but also languages in particular. So I want to see if I can get to my next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So one of the drivers for this, and in this room, I don't really need to rehearse it all, but just to kind of reference these challenges and more that you'll all be familiar with. So it's obviously increasing scrutiny of school contributions to institutional budgets going on in higher education in the UK, whereas institutions in the past have been comfortable with varying levels of percentage contribution. I think we're seeing a trend now from senior management and chief financial officers to conceive of a kind of a minimum, and that minimum being significantly higher than many humanities disciplines might normally return. So that's a trend. I can't explain why that trend is happening, but it is very definitely a trend among chief financial officers and VCs at the moment. And that puts pressure on modern languages because of the relatively labour-intensive or staff-intensive needs that we have. Not going to talk about the challenges to recruitment and that narrowing of the most recent trends, modern languages trends report was talking about in terms of more concentration in non-state provision for modern languages. There's also the challenge of AI, and I don't think this is about you can just translate things with AI these days. It is, as colleagues in Cardiff have been exploring actually in some of their own research, it is about what experience you are hoping to get out of the degree. What does language learning mean to you? And we are in a phase where what language learning means to me is very much being kind of challenged by the emergence of these new technologies. And obviously, we were aware that we were going to be having to face a restructuring at Cardiff, which, even though the shape of that only became clear towards the end of last year, it was clear that was in the offing. And sort of beyond the challenges to modern languages, there is another kind of a nested set of challenges, really, around humanities that were being felt in the other humanities schools in the university as well as languages. Obviously, we're in the context of, neoliberal higher education model, policymaker, this kind of culture of distrust, which I think is very aptly put by Meissner et al. This idea that, what is this really for? What value does it really bring? And mistrust around the kind of narratives that humanities scholars put forward. Also, a difficulty around kind of continuing to push ideas of transferable skills, talking about critical thinking and so on. It's not like students in chemistry or physics or in other branches don't do critical thinking, right? So it's some of these transferable skills were getting increasingly hard to kind of demarcate as, that's the humanities. A third factor really was thinking about future proofing. How can we create a structure that, when crudely put, the market changes, we do not have to close departments? Can we create a humanities structure which responds to emerging needs and trends, student needs, societal needs, and can repurpose the skills, knowledge, experience of those humanities researchers? And we all in this room know that humanities researchers, especially languages researchers and teachers, are incredibly flexible people. And another key sort of thing that we were thinking about in formulating these plans was, this idea of the polycrisis, the interlocking crises facing humanity as a whole. It does sound rather kind of like high flown, doesn't it? But I think that is one of the things that universities need to be here for, is helping us think about these interlocking environmental, economic, democratic crises, which we're all very, very aware of in our day-to-day lives. So the approach that we fixed on, or the key idea that we fixed on, I think, about global humanities, was really a challenge-led approach to the humanities, but perhaps not in the same way that you might think about it in STEM subjects, where it's about fixing a problem, finding a technical solution. This is direct from the document that we put together when we were proposing the school. They're saying whatever challenges humanity will face in the coming years, and whatever the results from rapidly advancing technologies and that promise to fix our problems, it will remain essential for us to understand human processes of experiencing and understanding and imagining and creating, which are the only context in which solutions become possible. Indeed, the decline in humanities provision would lead to, it's a quote from Costa here, generalised deficits in knowledge, sensitivity, imagination, cognitive resources, which are necessary to the acknowledgement of real problems within society, and likewise the development of possible solutions. Obviously, we're not the first people to think about this. Jonathan Bate, writing 15 years ago now, published this, just giving the example of climate change, right? So yes, we can have all the technical solutions you like in biochemistry, physical engineering, other scientific disciplines, but those questions about what is the value of life, what are our ethical obligations to future generations, to other species, to the planet itself, those are humanities questions. So we need to be foregrounding our contribution to those. Okay, so global humanities. I was told I couldn't use images in this, but I got an AI, hopefully copyright-free, generated image. The prompt was skeptical middle-aged professor. That's pretty good, actually, isn't it? Yeah. So we are obvious, and I've had conversations today with various colleagues where, I get this. It sounds like, it's a buzzword. It's a bit of marketing. It's just a bit of, it's just a bit of packaging so you can lump all these academic schools together. That is absolutely what we wanted to avoid. That is absolutely the challenge within our own institution. Not everybody is there yet. There's going to need to be a cultural change over the next few years to kind of engage with this notion. But there is a sort of an emerging discourse around this notion of the global humanities. It doesn't just mean, we're doing humanities and a few of us work on different countries, so therefore we're kind of global. Cambridge's Global Humanities Research Network. There are programs now at Princeton, Oxford, Linnaeus, undergraduate degrees emerging. I noticed St Andrews recently. I've given them 2 globals. They must be very global. So I was a typo. Global Digital Humanities Masters at St Andrews just recently announced. So it seems to be like a coming term. And I think even outside of institutions which aren't using that term, there is a shift in the humanities to kind of futures work, to challenge-focused work. I mentioned Edinburgh's Futures Institute here, but also here in London, the Interdisciplinary School. For those of you who've maybe come across it, encouraging kind of challenge-focused interdisciplinary work, not just in the humanities, but more broadly. And there is an academic discourse around this. It's not a unified academic discourse. It's very much a debate at the moment about what this term global humanities could mean. Some stressing more kind of anti-capitalist, ecological elements, decolonial perspectives, broadening of comparative perspectives. So in a way, we felt this also represented an opportunity for us, because there is something in the air, like there's something in the moment that people are talking about this idea of global humanities, but it's not fully defined. I don't necessarily think it has to be defined in the same way everywhere, but the challenge was really to think about what's our definition of this going to be? What is the Cardiff understanding of global humanities, and how does that bring us together? I'll skip through most of this because it is quite wordy, but I've highlighted the key terms which we in the end decided to work with. We already talked about the challenge-oriented, the transdisciplinary, so not just the fact that we are working together in an interdisciplinary way, but that we're also moving cross-sectorally, that we're working with partners beyond academia in our transdisciplinary endeavours. Associated with that, a commitment to the public humanities, contribution to cultural life in Wales. The Welsh language is going to be really, really important in this school. Obviously, the global research agenda. One of the most ambitious things, I think, is a global humanities curriculum. We are intending to create a challenge-oriented, future-oriented global humanities curriculum for all of our undergraduates, no matter what degree they are doing. So that is the most controversial, challenging part of what we are doing, but we are determined to set about it. Obviously, languages playing a significant role in our commitment to global mobility. So we're wanting to create a particular kind of Cardiff Global Humanities graduateness, which all of our students share, whether they're doing history or whether they're doing archaeology or whether they're doing modern languages, whether they're doing English literature, creative writing. So we are going to have to think about the pedagogies that get us there. The pedagogies aren't sort of divorced from this change. And when we talk about that graduateness, we want students who come away from our degrees as change makers, who recognise those global challenges, who recognise the contribution of the humanities to addressing those global challenges and want to go away and do something about it. Colleagues have said to me, well, of course our students do that. It's like, yeah, I'm sure they do. But do they know that? Yeah. Do they know that when they come to Cardiff that that's what they're getting? And then when they leave, they have the self-confidence to go out into the world and say, this is what I've learned to be able to do. At the moment, I think probably not. Okay, so very briefly then, this is still very much a work in progress. You may have heard that we've got a reduction in languages provision and we're going to have to repackage, restructure our languages provision. So it's not all rosy, but we do maintain our languages for all programme. We have the commitment to global mobility. It's going to be a process of us understanding as we come together in the new school how modern languages researchers are going to contribute to that agenda. That is a work in progress. But what I think is particularly heartening is starting to realise all those connections we have with the many historians, linguists, creative writing colleagues, etc., who don't just work through English, yeah? And who perhaps, I think, don't necessarily foreground that as something about themselves. It's just something they do, right? So I think helping them to work with us to foreground that is going to be really, really important. Also, the strong commitment to bilingualism in the Welsh language provision and multilingualism in the Welsh context, which is a Welsh government commitment to which the university is also, we hope, committed. Okay, so that's all I can tell you so far. And once we've heard from Derek, I'll be very happy to have questions. But of course, I didn't do this on my own, so I just wanted to highlight some of the names of colleagues who have supported this along the way, particularly my fellow heads of school, as you see there, and some names that may be familiar to UCFL as well, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think much as everybody is desperate, I know, to dive in and ask questions, I think we'll hear from Derek now, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. So I think, Derek, can you hear? You're with us, aren't you, over there virtually?
And I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see that?
We can see it. Yes, fantastic.
Is it showing in the proper format? Is it?
Slideshow. If you just go on slideshow, then we will see it in the proper format. But we cannot see your notes if that's what you're worried about.
I don't have any notes, so
Excellent.
right. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you to David for a really interesting talk just now. And I think we'll find there are points of similarity and divergence in the story so far. So what I will be talking about is where we've got to in terms of our journey here at Lancaster, which is slightly different background context to the Cardiff story. So just to give you, first of all, an idea of the timeline to development in the development of language education here at Lancaster. So pre-1990s, we were all in individual departments, so it's very common across the sector. And then during the 1990s, we came together into the School of Modern Languages, and we became DELC, the Department of European Languages and Cultures, in 1997. By 2016, with the addition of Chinese, we became DELC with a lowercase e, because we dropped the European from the name of the department. And in 2024, we became the School of Global Affairs. So this is where our journey so far differs from Cardiff's story, which involves the construction of a global humanities school with different disciplines in it, one of which being languages. And we, in contrast to that, as a department of languages and cultures, transformed into the School of Global Affairs. So currently, the School of Global Affairs at Lancaster teaches languages. And we do have some new interdisciplinary degrees that we have developed. So the context that David has set out very, very well, and in more detail than I am going to, involves the challenging student numbers in language education. So the working with the faculty here, I entered into a period of discussion through, and this was in 23-24, to see what we could do together to find common interests. In my interest being to preserve and, as David was saying, put languages on a sustainable footing here at Lancaster. And the faculty's interest was in innovative new structures and interdisciplinary teaching and creating platforms to deliver interdisciplinary initiatives, etc., creating new impact. So all of these things, I think, dovetailed, and we may have been coming at it from different angles, but we had common aims. So the idea really, from my perspective, was to re-envision language education to help us expand student recruitment, to see how we could embed languages into some innovative new interdisciplinary programs or post-disciplinary programs, either as core or optional. I would have preferred core. I think we ended up going optional for market reasons. We wanted to help enhance our reputation here as innovators in language education, help embed university values in language education, and align with our ongoing curriculum transformation project. So there were a lot of things coming together, including, of course, strengthening interdisciplinary collaboration between languages researchers and other disciplines. So a lot of things coming together at Lancaster that contributed to the way in which we re-envisioned language education. Now, I took quite a market-led approach to this, trying to think about the types of students who we could encourage to come into these interdisciplinary degrees, because these were the new exciting things we were developing that we wanted to embed languages within, and we wanted to get understanding of the kind of students. And there were a couple of types of student that we thought might come to take these interdisciplinary degrees. So an international affairs type of student who we profiled as likely to seek work in government service, think tanks, and so on, with more of an interest in disciplines such as political science, IR, public policy, security, intelligence, these kind of things, international law, and tended towards more of the nation state perspective in terms of viewing the world as dialogues and debates and rule setting between nation states. And then on the other side of the spectrum, although of course there are overlaps here, we profiled a kind of global humanities or social justice type of student who might want to, lean towards working in NGOs, global companies, that kind of thing, have interests in public health, environment, international development, migration, identity, politics, and so on. And maybe had more of a view towards seeing the world as flows of global global capital and people and ideas and the interactions therein. Of course, there are common interests in terms of their interdisciplinary kind of cores and options that we could offer. We developed a global leadership core and some of these modules that we think that's actually I think dovetails with what David was saying about change making. So we've gone down the line of calling it leadership here at Lancaster, and it's about helping, as David was saying, helping our students to understand and our staff to understand how graduates from the arts, humanities, social sciences can be leaders, or to use David's phrase, they can be change makers, and we shouldn't cede that territory to management schools and other parts of the institution. We can put our own distinctive stamp on it. So we went through a series of discussions about how we might brand the new languages and cultures initiative here. And, international affairs was considered, but maybe that wouldn't be so attractive to that global humanities student category that I mentioned. We did think about global humanities, but we decided not to go there because of the type of student who might be more interested in nation states and maybe put off by the term humanities. Honestly, one of the things that went through our mind was the way in which languages as a term had become perhaps unappealing in terms of the departmental profile. And we wondered if humanities might also have that effect. We're in a different context though from Cardiff. We're not setting up. When we went through this process, we were one department of 9 in in a large faculty of arts and social sciences. And I think the different dynamics obviously play into different decision making. Global studies, there was another term we considered, but it seemed a bit dated. Anthropocene seemed a bit too new. And then we settled on global affairs as the term that we thought might appeal to both sets of the students that I mentioned just now. So the ethos then became this, that we would be the School of Global Affairs delivering languages and also being a flagship for integrated global programs, and that would have the hallmark of interdisciplinary teaching, research, engagement, co-taught and shared modules. In the way the sector's moving these days, very integrated teaching, strong program content, global employability, study abroad, etc. So this was a new profile for us, and we have a new languages degree, BA Languages and Global Cultures, and then a whole range of different interdisciplinary degrees at BA and MA level that you can see there that we've launched. We still have an MA Translation Studies, of course, and languages as options in all of these interdisciplinary degrees at BA and MA level. And the BA Liberal Arts includes a year abroad, a 4-year variant with a languages year abroad. Our research has been transformed in terms of how we think thematically. We've aligned our research groupings with the idea of global challenges and social transformation, very much in line with the kind of thinking that David was outlining. So these are our new thematic research areas that we have several researchers in language contributing to them. But these themes also align with faculty priorities and this move towards challenge-based interdisciplinary thinking in research and teaching. Now, if you'll just indulge me for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to give some ideas about where we go from here. And I have to say, this is very much in the spirit of what David was saying, in that these are personal views and don't represent the institution, but kind of lead on from the logic that I've set out so far. Where I see us as being the kind of biggest challenge that faces us is this kind of idea of reglobalization that we're going through at the moment. So I think a lot of commentators have agreed that globalization as it was is now gone, and it's not quite deglobalization that we've entered, but it's more a kind of reglobalization where we have to calibrate between the nation state security concerns that are becoming more and more prominent in an unstable world, and we need to prepare our students clearly for participation in that kind of world. So the way I've been trying to think through this is that in the language of reglobalization, the thing like onshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, it's not that we want to prevent or disable global supply chains, if we put this into some kind of industrial language, but that it's a rebalancing towards onshoring to kind of respond to the changing dynamics as we move into this reglobalizing era. And so thinking always about the kind of arguments we can make to government about the need for government investment in languages. It's thinking more about how we emphasize the national security interests that are involved when we think about language skills, cultural knowledge, and so on, especially in areas such as politics, defense, technology, these kind of areas. And then there could be a kind of prioritization of languages that serve national security priorities. Of course, national security priorities are very much economic as well as to do with security and defense. And I think that there are many languages that could be prioritized. This is the point, of course. So just to emphasize, reglobalization is not retreating into isolation, not putting up a wall against foreign talent, but it's paying more attention to that pipeline that we focus on so much already, to encourage students in British primary, secondary schools and universities to study and research languages. And that is what I'm calling onshoring now, because I'm trying to use this security language that we see in other sectors. So if we think about security as one of the key words that's emerging in the deglobalization era, then language skills security seems to me incredibly important. And that means a country having sufficient language skills to guarantee its security and prosperity and flourishing and ability to engage globally in a more unstable world. And language skills security could contain ideas like political security, communication with friendly political actors, economic security to enable better trading and selective supply chains, national defense security, of course, means we need to have a good knowledge of the intent and actions of hostile actors, and societal and cultural security. If we are to have a stable society here in Britain, we need to integrate or we need to bring in a key focus to regional and heritage languages into our language policy. They cannot be ignored if we are to develop a rich understanding of how our society is composed multilingually. So here's my provocation to you. Final slide. Patriotic message. Your country needs you to learn a language. So could patriotism, which seems to be growing of a sort, not of a particularly healthy sort, but if we can get into that debate and shape it in a more open way, open to engaging with the world, albeit in a very careful way, then that may be a message that hits home with government and, crucially, with the market, with the people, the students, the prospective students who we want to take our degrees. Okay, so that's my provocation at the end there, and thank you very much for listening.
So, welcome everyone to this second panel that has as title From Benchmark to Practice, Sustainability and Entrepreneurship in Modern Languages. So my name is Fransiska Louwagie. I'm Vice Chair of Engagement and Communication. And we have 3 speakers on this panel. It will be my pleasure to introduce them. 2 of them are online. I thought that maybe the easiest was to introduce all 3 of them at the start so that you can kind of see where they are speaking from and how the different contributions will link together. We have allocated around 10 minutes to speak and then so that there is time for discussion as well. Okay, so it's my huge pleasure to first introduce Professor Ed Welch, former colleague of mine now, head of school at Durham. Joint research works, focuses on the radical transformation of space in France. He's the recent winner of the Gapper Book Prize, as you may have seen, for his latest book on making space in post-war France. And he is also speaking here in his capacity as the deputy chair of the UA benchmarking panel for languages, cultures and societies. So he will shed a light from that angle on the question of sustainability and entrepreneurship in modern languages. And then we will have 2 other colleagues speaking online about how that translates into practice. So first of all, we will have another former colleague of mine, Armelle Blin-Rolland. Her research focuses on environmental humanities and eco-criticism, also in a kind of mediality perspective. So she has a lot of expertise in bande dessinée studies, for instance. And so she will be speaking specifically today about her project, Greening Modern Languages, and so apply that as an angle to sustainability. Then we will have not a former colleague, but a neighbor of sorts from Stirling. I've taken some distance classes in pronunciation, so I'll do my best. Aedín Loingsigh, who is senior lecturer in Stirling. And so she will be talking about practical ways in which she's embedded sustainability-related issues and languages into teaching in her institution. And so these initiatives are also informed by the broader context in which we are operating, as well as linking to her own research interests in growing cultures, farming, and hedgerows, hedgelands. Okay, so we'll start with Ed, and then we'll move on to our speakers online. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fransiska. It's good to see everybody and be with people in person. It's always a pleasure to be able to kind of be in a room and engage in the discussion. And it's also nice to have Olga in the room as well, because as Olga mentioned, she was one of the 22 people who worked together to produce the benchmark statement that was published in 2023, all of the work for it. Really, the bulk of the work happened in 2022, and of course, this is already a document that's kind of three years old already. And you know, one of the gaps in the document, and this is germane, I think, in terms of thinking about the questions of sustainability and enterprise, was the fact that if you look at it, AI isn't really very present at all, and I think that's in part because the extent to which the speed with which AI came on the agenda is something that really happened. You know, in the year after we'd finalised the document. When we were putting together the revised benchmark, the QAA made clear that all the new benchmarks as they were being produced should engage with a set of what they were calling defining threads, or kind of running threads through the statements, of which two were sustainability and enterprise and entrepreneurship education. And the other two were inclusivity, accessibility, inclusivity, and diversity. So there were four kind of core sort of threads that ran through the document. And for us, thinking about these two, so I'll start with sustainability, which was quite an interesting one for us to reflect on for a couple of reasons. And sustainability here we weren't understanding it, or indeed invited people to understand it as the ways in which the term is, let's say, being used within discussions in different institutions in terms of understanding what a sustainable programme might look like, or what sustainable student numbers are. Although I suppose you might infer that thinking about how a programme can address these questions of sustainability, just to keep with that one for the moment, might also be about precisely the kinds of conversations that Derek and David have been having in the last session. So the ways in which, if you like, programs that we are thinking about and developing can integrate and engage with some of the broad challenges that sit underneath what you might call it in this instance sustainability. So I think in a way we weren't necessarily having in mind as a collective the kinds of initiatives that are emerging out of Lancaster and also possibly Cardiff, but in embedding thinking about questions of sustainability within the benchmark statements, I suppose we were inviting people who are reviewing their programmes to think about how they might address these cross-cutting themes that are not necessarily discipline specific, but are always going to be inflected by different disciplines and subject areas. In terms of the specifics, the ways in which we decided to frame the question of sustainability for the most part was in relation to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which give a useful framework and a useful starting point for thinking about how the notions of sustainability, which can be quite abstract, might get translated into particular themes or particular parts of a programme, or particular ways in which you can identify a programme as addressing certain requirements or certain skills developments. So we picked out four in particular. I'll very quickly just run through them. So inclusive and equitable education, promoting lifelong learning opportunities, achieving gender equality, reducing inequality within and among countries, and promoting peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. development, providing access to justice for all, effective, accountable, inclusive institutions at all levels. And inevitably those are the UN goals, and inevitably they are high level to a degree, abstract to a degree, possibly AI generatable. But at the same time, I think nonetheless they give people sufficient kind of keywords or ideas to work with to start translating them into possible themes within a program, within a module, in terms of presenting to prospective students what particular knowledge, interest, skills they might acquire in going through the program. And I think that's something that's come out very clearly in what Derek and Olga have been saying about how the current programs are being embedded within this particular framework in Lancaster. It's very interesting to see that development. And I guess the question always is with these things, the extent to which that it's a zero-sum game between addressing what you might see as these future directed or future-oriented concerns, the global challenge kind of context, if you like, while retaining that disciplinary specificity and that question of where have we come from as a set of disciplines, and are we at risk of losing some things? That long-standing tradition of developing kind of critical skills of reading through literature in particular. What is the relationship between those two things? And my view is it's not a zero-sum game, but thinking about how our programs are developed from this perspective or with this set of questions in mind, I think is actually quite an exciting and productive one. So that was one of the key ways in which we're inviting people to think about sustainability as they are orienting programs in new directions, responding to market changes, whatever it might be. There was an interesting part of that conversation, which is the fourth paragraph that we have under this heading. It's actually only half a side of the benchmark statement, but it was an interesting talking point with the group, and Olga might remember this, which is to do with the fact that as a set of disciplines and a set of degree programs, international mobility is, of course, embedded within them. We send our students on a year abroad. One of the challenges of that, actually, if we're sending students globally, to Latin America, to China, to Japan, wherever it might be, all those practices actually can be quite they are carbon intensive. They involve getting on jet planes and all the rest of it. So one of the implicit things in the document, we were careful how we worded this because we didn't want to give ourselves a stick to be beaten with, which is by saying that year abroads are bad because they generate lots of carbon. But at the same time, we were quite conscious of the fact that as a collective, we needed to do a bit of thinking about how that particular part of the degree that we offer that we think is very valuable and students think is very valuable, what that's going to look like over the next 10, 15 years, where these challenges of mobility could actually become quite pressing. And therefore, in that context, how do we think about time spent abroad? What are the alternatives to time spent abroad? And so on and so forth. So that was another part of the sustainability conversation that was quite interesting, but we were quite conscious could be quite delicate for us as a set of disciplines. And I'll leave that there as possibly something for us to return to or to think about, separately. So that was as far as sustainability was concerned. I'll say very quickly about entrepreneurship because I'm aware that my 10 minutes is probably kind of running out. But again, what's interesting in terms of how we were being invited to think about entrepreneurship, and in actual fact, of the four kind of cross-cutting themes, what's called enterprise and entrepreneurship education, AAE, if you like, has always really been present in these kinds of statements. It's the employability agenda, quote unquote, I suppose. But where this had a particular flavour or maybe a new inflection in this statement, I think again it has been echoed by the conversation we've heard previously. It's really interesting to see how that thinking about the story we tell to our students as they go through the degree, and the story that we tell to our potential students is being framed in precisely David, what you were calling the question of the change maker story, and in thinking enterprise and entrepreneurship, which are freighted with all sorts of neoliberal resonances, nonetheless within the benchmark, very much talks about. I suppose here Derek is talking about the you had your two poles of students, the international affairs students and the social justice global NGO students. And actually the language of the benchmark statements kind of almost unconsciously, I guess, is oriented towards the NGO social justice side of the kind of students who might be interested in doing these kinds of degrees. But nonetheless, I think he's also very much addressing the fact that what we are talking about and preparing students for are being adept and agile and resilient within quite a complex and fast-paced and fast-moving employment context, whether that's within their home country or whether that's within quote unquote, the global market. So I guess just to conclude, what's been interesting for me here in the previous conversation, it's going to be interesting to hear colleagues as they're thinking about how they've been taking forward some of these themes in their own modules, is the extent to which the thinking that we were having 3 years ago now is actually emerging as in line with thinking that's happening in other institutions, whether or not people have engaged, read the benchmark statements. Obviously, we all assume you have, but at the same time, I think it reflects maybe the benchmark statement perhaps captures a set of conversations that were already happening within the discipline and in a way being, I suppose, codified within the context of a statement like this, and we're seeing how it's playing out now as people are thinking about how they adapt to their curriculums, develop their programs, and actually talk to their students, whether that's prospective students or the students who they're taking through their program. So I'll stop there because I'm feeling I'm about 10 minutes done.
Thank you very much, Ed. So we'll go to Armelle Blin-Rolland next from the University of Bangor.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. That was really inspiring first talk about Ed. So there'll be a lot of echoes between our talks and Aedín's as well. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk about sustainability in modern languages. And like Fransiska said, I'll be focusing specifically on greening modern languages, which is a project that I've led with Martin Vega from University College Cork and Margaret C. Flynn at the Ohio State University. And it's a project that is very collaborative and that have brought together scholars working across languages with the overarching aim to think about the role that our discipline of modern languages can and has to play in times of ecological crisis. So the project was funded by a BA Liverpool Small Grants, and it's produced outputs. I'll be sharing my screen in a minute if that's okay to show the website. We've got a website in a special issue. So these outputs explore across different platforms and contexts ways in which to embed ecological knowledge and awareness in modern languages and to foster sustainable practices both in and beyond the classroom as well. But before I talk about outputs and the ethos of our project more generally, I do want to acknowledge that our concern with sustainability in modern languages has taken on perhaps increased urgency since we began the project in 2022, obviously echoing all the conversations that are taking place today already. So clearly we live in increasingly precarious ecological contexts, and we must obviously continue to work collectively towards new narratives, new solidarities, new imaginaries, and new practices for multi-species well-being and for meaningful sustainability that is rooted in justice. But a lot of us also work in increasingly precarious institutional contexts. Myself, I am based at Bangor University, and the very sustainability of a discipline is being questioned. Now, obviously, talk of a crisis is not new, but things have perhaps got even worse since the project again began in 2022. So we live in difficult times, and many of us live in toxic times. But today, amidst these sometimes violent realities, I do want to talk from a place of hope and with the conviction that the field of languages and cultures has a vital role to play in those urgent conversations to reassess and to reimagine all environmental cultures in the 21st century. So for sharing and for generating narratives and practices that are both grounded in territories as multi-species, multilingual territories, and also with a global and planetary outlook. I just wanted to mention the context, obviously, of what sustainability has been turned against modern languages as well in some ways. What I'd like to do now is just to give a brief overview of what the ethos of the project is generally. So what do we mean by greening modern languages? And then I'll be talking just very briefly about our outputs, our website, and then the residence I did in North Wales as well last year. But first, what do we actually mean by greening modern languages? So I've had the privilege to think about this question and to explore this question with colleagues that work across very geographical contexts in the US, in Ireland, in the EU, in Britain, in Wales, in England, in Scotland. So colleagues working across different geographical contexts, working across different languages as well. And across the discipline of modern languages, or word languages, as it tends to be called in the US now, or languages and cultures. So a discipline that itself is already in transformation, and a discipline that has obviously already been very productively decentered in the post-colonial context, and that has moved beyond any kind of nation-based boundaries to explore interactions of languages and cultures. So what we're trying to do maybe with greening modern languages is to further rethink the field, specifically in times of ecological crisis, in questioning its anthropocentric foundations and in placing interactions of not just languages and cultures, but languages and nature cultures at the core of our research and our teaching as well. And crucially, greening modern languages, as we conceive it, is an intervention that is deeply entangled with decolonizing and decentering the fields. And this means understanding languages also as tools of environmental violence and resistance. It means critiquing toxic discourses, denouncing their material effects across bodies and territories, exploring politics, ethics, and aesthetics of justice and solidarities across species and space, including minoritized and peripheralized areas. And if you look at our website, you see, for example, Galicia and Brittany have a very prominent place. So the project encompasses both research and teaching, and we also want to engage with environmental issues, not just in the cultures of our specialisms, what we teach about, but also the local environments and the communities in which our universities themselves are situated. To make our students also think about how those environmental issues that may be happening on the other side of the world actually echo with their own multi-species communities. So as I've already mentioned, there have been outputs stemming from this project. More recent one that I can mention briefly is a special issue of the Journal of Romance Studies that has just been published now in 2025. And we brought together articles that range across linguistic, including multilingual and transnational contexts, brings together approaches and methodologies in linguistics, eco-criticism, and pedagogical research, intercultural communication, and that examines key issues of language, narrative, space and place, catastrophe and injustice, and also innovation in teaching pedagogy. So it's a special issue that reflects our concern with both research and teaching. And another output of the project, which we launched last year, and I'm going to try to share my screen, is the website. Can you see that? Yeah.
It's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So the website, we launched it last year, and its website is constantly open to contribution. So if colleagues want to get in touch and have any ideas and ways in which they might like to get involved or contribute, we would really, really love to hear from people, because we're really keen to develop and expand it. So the website, as you can see, includes multilingual lexicon and a pedagogical toolbox. And the resources that you've got here, they can be filtered by language and by type as well for the pedagogical toolbox. And one point that we want to do is to actually draw inspiration from other languages. So we're also trying to make links between different entries across languages. So just to talk briefly about the lexicon, what we're trying to do with this one. So the lexicon, basically, it brings together words and phrases that we feel are key to different nature cultures, because what we wanted to promote and learn about was how different languages think and talk about the environment, what vocabulary of environmental violence, resistance, and justice have developed across different historical and geographical contexts, and also what resonances, divergences, emerge across different languages of the environment. and more broadly, how a multilingual and multicultural lexicon of environment terms can actually help us in our efforts to rethink our relation to the world and human. So the aim is kind of rooting an understanding of language as a way in which we see the world, obviously act in the world, but also perhaps in ways in which we can act differently in the world in a more meaningfully sustainable way. So that's for the lexicon, which, as you can see, is organized per language, but we do make a lot of different links between different entries. The toolbox is the other key resource on our website, the pedagogical toolbox. Where the aim is to share resources for developing ecological awareness in conjunction with linguistic and cultural diversity, so as part and parcel of intercultural competence. So there's a lot of resources that are available already. And again, I hope people will take a look and, see the kind of resources that we've got. We have PowerPoint, we have things that focus on assessment, got different levels, different languages. There's a couple of resources that we want to highlight today just because the contributors are here. One is Mort, Making a Deadhead, which is by my fellow panelist Aedín, who I think might actually be talking about this project in a minute. And that's a resource that's really inspiring because it kind of takes sustainability beyond the classroom as well. Another resource I wanted to highlight is Rethinking Students' International Mobility in the Climate Emergency by Olga, which also echoes what Ed was talking about just now. But overall, what the toolbox strives to show, to share, and put into practice is the importance of developing our students as equal citizens with a critical understanding of environmental issues across the planet, and promoting multilingual knowledge and intercultural competence as a key strength in the ecological citizen toolkit, in helping our students understand ecological issues as they happen on the ground across the world by engaging with primary texts and testimonials that in languages other than English. And also for them to think about how this resonates with their own situated contexts, their own environments, and their own multi-species communities. So this vision that we've got for greener modern languages has potential benefits. Also, of course, for international language learning, not just at higher education level, but also at primary and secondary level. And just to finish, I did want to talk about a local follow-on project that I did last year in North Wales, where I'm based, which did take this vision to primary and secondary education. And that was a greener modern languages curriculum for Wales, which I've written an entry about this project as well on the website. So the vision of a greener modern languages that we've been trying to work towards actually finds some really strong resonance with Wales, and in particular with the new curriculum for Wales, which has a focus on integral skills, so beyond subject divides, and also with the Well-being of Future Generations Act, which has already been mentioned, which programs a collaborative and long-term approach to improving well-being for people and the planet. The working in partnership with GUE, Global Futures, and with an award-winning French graphic artist called Anne de Frivière. Last year in May 2024, we organized innovative creative workshops with primary and secondary pupils with year 5, 6, 8, and 10 from across North Wales. And our aim was to explore how international languages and creativity can be tools to empower those pupils, those young people, to express how they feel about the environment and to take a stand about the environment. So we had 3 days of activities. We had 2 days of comics workshop where the students actually drew. You can see some examples here. So they drew and they wrote, so they created their own éco-bande dessinée, so their own eco-comics in French. And then on the last day of the residence, what we did with primary school pupils specifically is that we created a multilingual natural mural. So we used biodegradable paints that was made from pigments and egg yolks, because obviously it was important for us not to actually use toxic paints, to also think about our own impact. And so so the pupils drew the murals. You can see the whole thing at the top, I think. Yeah. And then you can see that there are bits and bobs that are written. So what this is that each pupil then wrote an environmental slogan of their choice in the international language of their choice. So we've got some Catalan, we've got Breton, we've got Chinese, I think we might have Spanish as well. So each pupil wrote that slogan on the mural and then they stamped it as the message that they wanted to communicate about the environment. And a lot of those slogans are activist slogans. So these showed that international language learning can help us not only understand environmental issues from different perspectives, but also develop our critical and creative engagements with the world and human world and express how we feel and to take a stand about what we believe in. So feedback from the pupils and from the teachers was really positive, and it was also a really rewarding experience for us in seeing what a vision of a green and modern language can look like locally and in practice, so in fostering eco-literacy through multilingual, creative and critical understanding of sustainability that is rooted in resistance, injustice and in hope. So just to conclude, these are times that have been testing our capacity for resilience. But again, I did want to speak today from a place of hope, with the conviction of the potential of modern languages to foster critical and creative engagement with the world and human world across the planet, and to contribute to new multilingual, multi-species, multicultural imaginaries and practices for well-being through dialogues between natures and nature cultures. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Armelle. There was a question, I think, of whether you could put the link to the website in the chat as well. And we'll move on to Aedín Loingsigh from the University of Stirling.
Okay, so first of all, thank you to Ed and Armelle. I've been working with Armelle and I cannot speak highly enough about the collaboration that we have. And I'm going to echo her point about writing to her about the pedagogical toolbox, because not only does she put this up there, but she actually designs it beautifully. So you have you have evidence of what you're doing to show your university senior management and anybody else who needs to know about modern languages and sustainability. So yeah, shout out to Armelle for that. So I'm going to talk about what we've been doing in Stirling a wee bit. I'm not going to talk about this issue about the storm brewing. I think let's move on from bad weather, because we've had enough bad news lately. And I just talk about the background in Stirling just very briefly. We are pushing outdoor learning for students with colleagues in the primary education in particular. And we have about 5 new spaces, some of them that came about after the storms last December, because we had a lot of material lying around the place to do that. So cost neutral, there are issues there, I think you can see, with accessibility that we are going to have to address, but it's a start. And it's a context that is really encouraging a lot of staff to think about not just what they teach, but where they teach. Other contexts that are, I suppose, influencing what I've been doing in Stirling are our own strategic plan for 2030, which has the line somewhere very early on, everywhere is local. We also have a sustainability plan in the university, like every other institution, and part of that involves embedding sustainability in our teaching. As well as everything being local, of course, the university is stressing global, as is secondary school education in Scotland, with a push towards global citizenship. And my line, whenever I am talking to anybody about global citizenship, is that there's no sustainable development without global citizenship, and there's no global citizenship without the study of languages. So the next, I suppose, important context in Stirling is, and I've got a quote there from the QAA benchmark that Ed has already been talking about. The study of languages, cultures and societies offers opportunities for students to analyse, evaluate, apply and reformulate knowledge on sustainable visions of the future, etc., etc. The other big context, I guess, that I need to speak to you about just now is a new university-wide level 7 module that was set up in autumn 2023, which is, let's say, owned by the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, and to which I was asked to contribute as a lecturer in modern languages. The module is called Wicked Problems and Sustainable Solutions, and this is some of the blurb from that. Staff asked to contribute to an interdisciplinary approach that, and I quote, draws on the methods and skill sets of the humanities, sciences, business studies, and social sciences to explore how interdisciplinary responses to sustainable development challenges can be modelled, developed, communicated, and applied more effectively in the future. And the image there is the image that I chose for the module. It is a sketch by Vincent van Gogh of something I think all of us who visit France in particular, mainland Europe, but particularly France, who in my estimation is the world leader in pollarding. So I wanted that pollarded image of pollarded trees to form the sort of visual cue for what I was going to do in this module. And Armelle has already mentioned this. It's on the pedagogical toolkit. I'll talk to you about it very briefly. And I suppose it might address the comments by the colleague who spoke there a while ago about this, what's happening to the literary basis for language study. And I guess this project came out of literary research into the text you see there by Jean-Luc Rassard, L'Homme des Haies, which means the hedges man. And it is about a retired farmer and his obsession with hedges, which is an obsession I happen to share. So I designed this practical creative seminar activity, and it's underpinned by critical, multilingual exploration of hedge symbolism and sustainability in action. You can read about it if you wish in Armelle's toolkit. You'll see that there's a lecture and a seminar activity. And the seminar activity, quite simply, just involves getting the students outdoors, working in teams, gathering whatever wood they can find and building a hedge. There are, you see, I have absolutely no other description of the seminar activity for them, really. It's a kind of creative sustainability in action, and then they reflect on it in a journal that they submit at the end of the module. All I will say is that one student described this activity as making Lego outdoors, and another student said it was the best one they had had in university thus far. It was also the best one I had as a teacher last year. The second project I want to talk to you about is an orchard that we planted in Pathfoot this previous March. The artwork there is by a colleague in digital media. It simply involved planting an orchard. We had to get permission, of course, but we wanted the orchard to speak to ideas that Armelle has already been talking about, and that is the connection between language and the landscape. And in particular, the landscape we have on campus, where the linguistic dimension of it is often erased. So we picked a courtyard in a part of the campus that's called Pathfoot that had in the past been a village. So we unearthed, if you like, or dug up the history of that place together with the Scottish national poet laureate, Pádraig McGee, who's a bilingual poet who had just took up this post in 2025. We met him and he agreed to write 2 poems for this event. We also had a poetry workshop, a collage-based poetry workshop with our students in preparation for the orchard. And quite simply, what we want to do with this orchard is just to grow a place that we will associate with a deep knowledge of the environment, hands-on knowledge of the environment, and one that grows as our discipline grows and as the university changes and so on. And I think also, just to reply to one other thing I want to say about both of these activities, which I think is really, really important, they are both what I call slow activities. And I'm a great believer in slowing things down. in a context of huge speed and uncertainty and rapid change. It's not anything old-fashioned or nostalgic. It is really about having the slow with the fast. And that really was also part of my thinking behind these two activities. And I just close with a photograph of the orchard in one of the trees. There are about 10, 11 trees, I think. And so far, they're all doing well, apart from one cherry tree, which hasn't made it, but all the others have. And this is a translation of one of the poems Pádraig MacCoy wrote in Gaelic about the orchard. And it is a poem about connecting language with taste. So I'll leave it at that. Just two ways that I've been trying to embed sustainability in languages in Stirling. Okay.
Thank you very much, Aedín, and all three speakers for, I think, what have been very inspiring talks and also nice illustrations of resilience in the current context.
So thank you for everybody who stayed till the last session of the afternoon. We've been looking quite a lot at how we've diversified in terms of the bigger picture and the content of our degrees. And here we're going to spend a bit of time for the next hour looking at how we've diversified the languages, diversified the levels, and here in the first instance, from Helen Monribot, who's Head of Languages at Hertfordshire Business School. And I have noticed actually that a lot of our speakers are in very different shaped schools, so I dare say that's going to be part of the fun. So over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying. I know we're all melting as the heat goes up, but I'll try and keep it brief. And then if anyone wants to fire questions later on, please do. So yeah, I'm based at the University of Hertfordshire. I am a French and Germanist by trade, and I still teach, even though I lead the department on a 0.8. Just to sort of hint at the workload I probably have. I think I worked my workload out at 147% the other day, which I'm sure is not too unfamiliar to many of you in the room. Our provision is probably a bit different to a lot of you in the room. I think you've got... Oh, no, just skip through that slide. We don't need all of that. Go on. Just showing you where Hatfield is in case you didn't know, but please don't go there, it's awful. Really, there's no reason to go to Hatfield. And St Albans, not too far away, lovely. So we don't offer degree programmes. We only exist as a kind of a bunch of minor subject or minor subject modules. So we tend to pull our students from the business school and from what used to be the School of Humanities, which no longer exists. At the moment, we have two business programmes, International Business and International Tourism Management. We still have 5 humanities programmes. We call them the HUMS programmes because they were once. So they are philosophy, history, there's a new sociology programme, and we also have English language and linguistics and English literature. So they are our faithful humanities programmes. We only have one course instance in UCAS. It used to be quite different, and I will take a step backwards in a moment so you can have a look at that. But we have international business with modern languages. So we no longer have named languages. So if a prospect in year 12 is word searching for French or Spanish or Japanese, they won't find us. Okay, big problem for us. We have a very traditional provision of 15 credit modules, one module per semester over 12 weeks. The beginners get 3 hours of contact time and everyone else gets 2 hours of contact time. We expect them to do, I don't know how many hours of independent learning. Do they do it? No, they don't, because the majority of our students are widening participation students. Most of them are commuting, and most of them have caring responsibilities. A lot of them have health problems, and most of them are working a full-time job. Okay, so that's another challenge that we have. This year, our semester A enrolments were 130 across all of the 6 languages and all the different levels. So very, very thinly spread. We had 90 last year, and I really thought we were going to go. So I managed to scrabble together 40 single-handedly. Don't tell me, I can't even begin to tell you how I got there, but yeah, we did manage to round up a few more. So we're working on it, and we are trying to fill up those classrooms. If we don't, we will be gone, probably within 3 years. So I'm very, very aware of that. We do allow students to study with us for additional credit. So they can come in and study those modules with the ones that are on our home programmes, as I like to call them. And we've got 18% of our students doing it like that. So we will get random ones from engineering. We might get some postgrad students from the business school, and we just sort of throw them in and they study with the undergrads. We don't have an institution-wide languages programme. That does not exist. It never has existed at our institution. And we don't have short courses for the wider public. We don't have anything that's paid for. We did do that 10 years ago, but they went a long time ago. So that's where we are this year. So if we go on to the next slide, we can sort of take a bit of a step back.
I think that's just appeared now. That's visual.
Oh, okay. Right, okay. So you can do a quick comparison here. Yeah, so I pulled out some figures from 2018, 2019. We were in 11 business school programmes, and we only had 4 humanities programmes at that time because sociology didn't exist. We also had a joint honours programme that has long gone. A plethora of course instances with all of the individual named languages. So you could do economics with German. I used to love those students. They were fabulous. Event management with Japanese, history with French. I've just seen my last history with French student go through with that title. So yeah, those days are gone now. We used to have 748 students across all of those modules, and we're down to 130. So that's quite frightening when you look at it. Okay. And at that time, only 1% of those students were actually studying with us for additional credit. So quite a different makeup. We used to have, you can see we've got an intermediate route there. We used to have a German intermediate route. We used to have German advanced. So like everywhere across the country, German's disappearing. But I did have 8 in my beginners group last year, and I was very excited about that. Can you imagine getting excited about single figures? That's where we're at. We didn't have Korean, and we do now. So that's a plus. It's a little win. It's a little win. So you can see that the situation has changed quite dramatically for us in a matter of a few years. If we go on to the next slide, I like to use emojis quite a lot. Face screaming with fear. We've got that rapid decline in numbers. We've lost our course instances. We're losing, because the home programmes are recruiting less in themselves, they've got declining numbers. So we've got even fewer students to recruit from. And obviously we've lost the German intermediate and advanced route, which personally I'm absolutely gutted about. But I'd like to say it's paused. It's on pause. We can always bring it back. I'm still there. I'm not gone yet. So we do have some little wins. Sociology was introduced 2 years ago, and they were quite adamant that they wanted to include some sort of language learning in there. Originally, it's just they went with the idea of beginners at level 5 only to give them a taster of a language learning, to increase their self-awareness, new perspectives, all of that stuff. We're actually moving towards a 3-year pathway in sociology now, so that's a little win. There won't be a lot of them, but it's a win. We managed to introduce Korean. I don't know any other colleagues that have introduced a new language at this point in time in a situation like ours. So I thought, well, that's a little win. I'll take that. And we have seen this increase in numbers of students wanting to study for additional credit. So I know that we have a client base. So that's something I have to work with. We are now in the business school. So Humanities was merged with education and disbanded within the same academic year, which was horrendous. And then languages was kind of splintered off from all of that. And we were plonked in the business school because traditionally a lot of our students do come from there. So it makes sense. And they are a much more secure place to be. But they are just starting to notice that they're not allowed to have coffee at meetings and things like that. There is a financial freeze even for the business school, who bring in millions with all of their postgrad students. So, they've started to realise even they are not immune to these sort of changes. But, I try to be a glass half full kind of a person. So I think you have to look for the wins and what you can do where you can, despite the tidal wave that feels like it's encroaching. Shall we jump to the next slide? There you go. So I won't just read these out to you, but I think the key challenges are there. I think they are the same for all of us. You know, there's nothing new there that we haven't perhaps mentioned. You know, you've got your national decline. We know that that's been compounded by Brexit, pandemic, the arrival of AI. You know, you don't need me to tell you that. I think complexity has often been our enemy because the way in which we sit in other programs, it means that the timetablers don't like us. Marketing don't like complex course instances. I can see lots of nods. I'm sure we're all familiar with those. Complexity is great. You know, students love optionality. Systems don't. So that is a barrier. Internal restructuring, as I've just mentioned, you know, we're all facing that, you know, and we are no different. Financial constraints, we are in a position, we've got a complete financial freeze at the moment. So I have a member of staff, full-time Spanish, going on maternity leave, and I've been told I can't appoint. You know, okay, don't know how I'm going to teach those modules. So we have to do it all with visiting lecturer hours, and finding good qualified BLs who can teach right through from beginner to advanced is not easy in the current climate. But I found one. This is where networking becomes hugely important. Our visibility to the outside world, as you can imagine, is huge. You know, in UCAS, we're hardly there. The website is a nightmare. You know, you can, you know, if you put languages into our search engine on the website, it will bring up English language and linguistics. It will bring up international business with modern languages, and that's it. Yeah, but I thought someone said you could do it with history. Yes, you can. It's on this page. So I'm working very hard on that at the moment. And I don't think I should, you know, in a sense, I've left it to last because I feel it's the most important part. I cannot say to what extent, you know, the impact on the staff is just horrendous. You know, the words behind me say, oh, me included. So let's have a look what we've done about it. I'll try to be positive. Are they popping up? Yes, they are. So the first thing I thought I needed to do was to promote the option to study for additional credit. We're not recruiting from those home programmes. I have to tap into that client base that is out there. And that's worked well. You see, we went from 1%, we've gone up to 18%, and I know that we can go further. Done a lot of liaising with colleagues from marketing who historically have not been our friends. But we were just chatting in the break about this. The social media team, however, within marketing are very helpful. They like the multilingual community. They like video content. They like anything that celebrates that. So as a team, we are collecting a lot of content. We use it on our own Instagram accounts. We share that and we support we support the social media bit of the marketing team with what they do. And in return, they will support us with what we do. So they have been really, really helpful. And I'm also working with the web team to improve this search engine function. And we also have a thing called Ask Hearts. So once the students arrive with us, that is their first sort of port of call. It's embedded within the app and everything. You know, if they put in the word languages, it pulls up a landing page with all of our information. And that has been hugely, hugely helpful. So I think trying to understand how marketing work and working with them. But again, it's all part of the 147% workload. It's very time consuming. I need to find a way around, addressing that and making sure that it is included. So that's been really, really helpful. The Instagram account is also very helpful for staying in touch with prospective students. So at open days, I always give them a QR code. They scan it, or they come straight into the Instagram account and they can stay in touch with us in that way. And they follow, and it gives them a sense of what we do, who we are, what's going on in the institution. We pop up on their feeds, and that seems to work really, really well. And I use my LinkedIn account. And I know this morning we were talking about LinkedIn. I wouldn't, I know not every academic likes to be on LinkedIn. It's a little bit like Facebook for suits. It might be, but I do use it a lot, and it is very useful. Sometimes, unashamedly, for in-house promotion, so that the business school know exactly what I'm doing. It works, but sometimes I don't always like to be too kiss-ass corporate, as I call it. And I will also do a lot in terms of promoting languages and what we do collectively as a discipline. So I sort of have one foot in and one foot out on that front. So, but again, it helps with the central marketing team, and they will repost stuff and signpost for us. There's a few other ideas there. So, I think refreshing the offering and bringing in Korean just so that it's very visible that we're doing something different, something new, and it does tap into different students. We get a lot from creative arts that are very, very interested in that. So that was good to see. And we've been trialling anything and everything we can possibly do. So trying to get into the postgrad client base. We know they want to learn languages, but we can't get into programs. International politics will not put us in. International MSc will not put us in. For various reasons, and very good reasons sometimes, usually because somebody doesn't want to pay for VL hours. So we've tried those things, but they're on pause. You can see this little pause line there around postgrad. We're focusing very much on revamping undergrad provision at the moment. We feel that's our sort of home, it's where we belong. So we've just paused that and we're focusing on that for the moment. The international office have been incredibly helpful. I don't know if anyone else knew this. I didn't know this until recently, but Turing funding can be used to fund language teaching. Yeah, that was my response. Really? I did not know that. So our current head of international has been really good at helping us to put on some sort of pre-study abroad courses, just little taster online things in semester C. Which the students really appreciated. We got some very good feedback, and then we went from 2 courses last year to 5 courses this year. That person is retiring. I'm not sure if his replacement is likely to do the same, but there's some good feedback there, so hopefully they will continue with those. We've looked at connecting with deans, deputy deans, to see if we can do bespoke things in others, like engineering. Once upon a time we had engineering with French, and that's long gone, and the engineers come to me, they want to do the automotive ones want to do German, needless to say. But they can't put us in the curriculum, but it's like, can we do something bespoke for you? No, we don't want to spend the money. Same old argument. So I've just put a pause on all of that. We've got a new medical school, super school thing growing. It's like, well, can we do, Spanish for medics? We've got a colleague who's done that before at Leicester. We could offer some intel on that. No, we don't do that. And we've sort of started looking at some of these more cross-cultural modules that seem to be embedded in a lot of the business school programs generically. It's like, managing global teams, blah, blah, blah. We could do that, but do we want to? Right, that's that slide. So, am I running out of time? Very quickly. So where we're going next? We've got more structural changes ahead for 2026. This revamp that's going on. They're moving towards 30 credit modules, which is almost unbearable at the Port for Languages in the way that we teach them. But we have retained 15 credits as it happens, but we're going into 6-week blocks, like mini intensive courses with gaps in the middle. So that's going to be very challenging. We are remaining within the former humanities programs, but they're slimming down the pathways as we pump everything into this future fit thing. We have to kind of remove it from elsewhere. So the truth is that one program with the one course instance is not enough to sustain us, and we're very conscious of that. So what can we do? Not a lot, probably. I'm still trying. If just click to the next slide and I'll bring that to a close because of time. There we go. So my big thing for next year, if I just pick it out from behind me, is to introduce some 0 credit bearing modules that I will overlap with the original provision and get in as many students as I possibly can. So there's a flexible mode of delivery that is potentially scalable if they choose to retain us. So students can choose either 10 weeks, self-assess, or they can then swap to the 15 credits, do the extra work do the assessment. So it gives them a bit of flexibility. They can switch between the two. And I'm just going to try and get as many as I possibly can into my classrooms.
Thank you so much. An inspiring list of opportunities seized. And we'll pass over now to Vicky, who is no stranger to UCFL, a long-standing member of the University of Southampton, another unit that's changed names. At the moment it's the Department of Languages, Cultures and Linguistics. And over to you, Vicky.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to work out how to move on with the show. Okay. Well, thank you, Helen, for all that positivity that you've just exuded. I just wish you all the very, very best. I don't think you could do any more than you're doing. And I can't emphasise enough, of course, having a strategy, which is really what you're doing, Helen. But so I feel very humble moving on to our session, looking at Southampton. And as you've just said, Olga, we are LCL now, Languages, Cultures and Linguistics. We occasionally forget which we still are. We were Modern Languages and Linguistics not that long ago, previously Modern Languages, previously Departments of French, German, SPLAS, and the Language Centre. Just moving on, I thought just a little bit about languages at Southampton, language learning at Southampton. We had a postcard that we used a couple of years ago to try and promote languages across the piece, just to say what Southampton had to offer. At the time, the postcard was 100 reasons, but I remembered that Roots into Languages had 700 reasons, so I couldn't resist putting a link to the poster that we used to have quite some years ago that we used to put into schools to remind students there are many reasons for learning languages. So at Southampton, we have the credit-bearing modules, which can be part of the degree, so you'll see that at the top of the screen. We're very lucky enough, Helen's just mentioned talking to the International Office looking for touring funding. We're very lucky that the International Office does support language learning at Southampton, and we have what I've called the language opportunity courses. And this offers a number of different languages, up to 20 hours free language study, very popular. How many students continue for the full course, that's a different question perhaps. What's particularly popular are the intensive courses, and we've got 8 languages on those, and they have a 1-week intensive course at Easter all summer, very, very popular. And then we still have lifelong learning, fee-paying evening courses, which some of our students do. And so we mentioned that they're mostly lower level languages, and you can see there the advert for the language opportunity courses. They fill up very, very quickly, and usually it's a waiting list for those free courses. Many of the international students take those as well. So I'll just move on to a little bit more about languages as well, language teaching and learning. Then I'm going to look a little bit at the curricula. And I started with innovation, so it's expansion, adaptation, innovation. But I'll start with innovation, and I'll put a question mark by innovation, because some of you will know about the language stages which we operate at Southampton. We started, and this is where I'm not sure it's innovation anymore, we started in the late 90s, thinking through this yesterday, to think about the CFR, which was just coming into being in the late 90s and then published in 2001, thinking, I've got all sorts of language teaching across the university. It's a little bit all over the place. We have many different levels. So we decided at that point, late 90s, to develop a framework based on the CFR, and we developed 7 language stages. And each stage on credit bearing modules takes a double module, so 1 module in each of 2 semesters. But where students enter or exit those language stages may depend upon, or whether required to enter or exit, may depend upon their degree programme. So modern linguists might have to enter at stage 4, enter stage 6 or 7. Of course, we've got beginners courses, and because these language stages are offered across the university, many programmes will just allow students who perhaps haven't had language before to start at stages 1, move on to stage 2 and so on. The other thing, which is not really innovation either, is that language teaching is organised by the Centre for Language Study. It was innovative when we started in the early 2000s. This was a former language centre, which was sitting alongside the departments of languages at the time, but is now an integral part of our department. And language teaching is carried out by professional language teachers, colleagues who are responsible just for language teaching. And these structures, if we think about it, and this is perhaps where the innovation is, have allowed the maintenance of breadth, if not depth. So it allows us to offer a range of languages, and got my colleague Marta Crosby, who's on the call as well. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. We've got up to 9 languages plus English that we can offer at undergraduate level. The language opportunity has a different set of languages. I think it's set up to 8 or 9, and then the evening programme as well. So we've got that breadth, if not the depth. We don't teach all of those languages to the same stages, same level, but we do manage to offer a broad language across the university. Bear in mind, it's going to be taken standalone or as part of the language minor, so students can accumulate credit and then earn a language minor as part of their degree, wherever they are in the university, as long as their programme allows that possibility. Just moving on a little bit more to expansion and adaptation to new markets, and there's no point talking about all the issues that we're all trying to face. We're all looking for new markets, even if they're new types of students, or appealing to students who are no longer thinking of languages, but we do want them to. So Ab initio language is available for 2 and 3 language degree programmes. So along with many other universities, we're allowing students to come in to study languages who, at the next session, we'll look at ab initio. Students who don't have an A-level will be able to come in and do a 2 or 3 language degree, but in the case of 1 language degree, they will have to have an A-level. We've introduced new modules thinking of students who are perhaps not as familiar with the sorts of skills that they have or should have at A-level, and so we have this new module, Academic Skills for Modern Language and Linguistics students, and as it says, aiming to ease that transition from A-level to the first year of a single or combined honours degree programme. And we have these new BA degrees or pathways, and this is where the new markets comes in, with or without a foreign language, and with or without a year abroad. And for these particular programmes where a year abroad is not compulsory, they can use the Humanities semester or year abroad options. They have slightly different programmes for Humanities students. I look after these students with a wide range of opportunities in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, in Latin America, North America and beyond. And these appeal particularly to students who are not particularly thinking of French or German or Spanish or one of the more traditional degree options and years abroad. So the first 2 degrees that we introduced in addition to our modern languages degrees were English language and linguistics. And that was aiming really at A-level English students who could be interested or would be interested in studying language and linguistics, but of course in a modern language environment where of course they had the opportunity to start a language possibly from scratch. English language and literature, working with our English departments, and then much more recently, and this appeals much more perhaps to those more traditional linguists, language, culture and communication. So an A-level is not required to enter this degree, but languages are required in your first year, and you can take, and again, I think Matt will have to help me if I don't get this right. You can continue with languages after your first year, so they're compulsory in the first year. You can do up to 2 languages in your first year, and you could add a third language if you already have an A-level after the first year. And this particular degree explores the relationship between language and culture in a globalised world, combining linguistics with cultural and anthropological approaches to communication, etc., etc. And I just wanted to land on the anthropological for a while, just sort of reminded me listening to earlier speakers when we were talking about the need to look at history, the need to remember literature as well. And I was thinking, ethnography does allow us to link language and place and time. And I think that's particularly important on that degree. And languages, we hope, will be taken up by these students, even if they don't come up come in with a modern language. Staying with expansion and adaptation and probably its simplification along with everyone else, look for French in UCAS and it's going to be hard to find single honours degrees or German or Spanish. So we've moved away from named single combined honours degree to modern languages plus one language. And there are 3 languages available for those students, or you can have modern languages with 2 languages, and now we've got 4 languages available for you. And you could take 3 languages, and now we've got 5 languages available. You might ask why there are different numbers of languages available for each of those options. That's because if you're doing 3 languages, probably 2 of your languages be at a much lower level. And so we can offer a wider choice of languages, because not all of our languages are taught to stage 6s or 7. They may be only taught to stage 3 or stage 4. So we can offer more languages at a lower level. We also have modern language and linguistics, plus 1 language or 2 languages. And for that, there's 3 languages available. Those will be French, German and Spanish. We have several combined language degrees available, and I put in brackets for the moment. I understand the first 2 here, politics and philosophy of the language, are under threat, and business management, which is no surprise. Moving on to postgraduate pathways, and again, it's new markets, I think. In addition to applied linguistics and ELT programs, which are very lucky to recruit well to, and again, it's mainly overseas markets. We've introduced new masters in translation and professional communication skills, and that's again probably aimed more at the international student. But languages and culture, this is, I suppose, developing something that we offer at undergraduate level, much more at postgraduate level. We had a transnational MA programme at one time, and this replaces it in many ways. And then this one draws on research centres from across LCL, and of course also from the wider School of Humanities. Very similar to our undergraduate degree I just mentioned, covering a variety of cultural and literary topics, and the history, ethnography and anthropology. No global in there, but I think it's implied. Just moving on, the last 2 decades or so have been a period of evolution as much as adaptation to internal and external factors. I just wanted to mention that when discussing this with a colleague yesterday, they reminded me, well, mainly the internal factors, issues of funding, or mainly because of those external factors. We're just not recruiting to the large numbers that we have done in the past. So obviously, not unique changes. These things are reflected across the sector. I haven't reflected on the impact of COVID. Helen mentioned, of course, there were changes in the way we teach, greater use of technology, including AI, how we organise our working lives, even the continuing question of recruitment. I'm not going to go on about big need for outreach. And of course, we mentioned the languages pipeline this morning, but I just did want to pull this one quote from Languages Trend Survey. There is just a tiny little bit of positive news there. At A-level, French, German and Spanish all show an upward trend year on year from 23, and when combined, other modern languages are also up. And as it reminds us, as a community of linguists, we must celebrate this turning of the tides and work to increase uptake in the coming years. And I'll just finish with that slide from the report, from the Trends report. It's encouraging. There's an uptick. Let's hope it continues. But we'll have to work a bit harder, I suspect. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's been mentioned also passing in thinking about the levels, and that's something that Southampton's done particularly well. And then we've got Marcela from Durham, who's our very own Vice Chair in Education, and Anna, who was once part of the steering group too for UCFL, is now Director of AULC, and of course, the Director of the King's Language Centre. Together, you've put together some thoughts about diversifying the levels of languages.
Thank you, and thanks for staying with us until the very last minute of the afternoon. We're all tired and hot, but anyway, Anna and I were going to speak separately about initio languages, but then we thought, well, what's the point of doing that? I was invited to a university which we stay anonymous to talk about initio languages. I thought most universities would have introduced initio languages. I found out not everyone has done that. And I will talk about you will talk about your institution, but at Durham, we've only started with French ab initio this year. And German ab initio about, well, it was pre-COVID, so recently, okay? I'll just go very briefly, I'll talk about what I said to that university about ab initio modules and the obvious reasons why they matter from the point of view of widening participation. And Durham, we need to do better at widening participation. So it was a no-brainer to have this option as well. Responding to policy limitations, somebody in the audience that day said policy, what was it? Anyway, it was a harsher term. Let's stay with limitations. And this, having ab initio modules is a way of rebuilding opportunities. And we've seen through that British Academy survey that adults regret not having engaged with languages more in schools. So that's a good opportunity through this. Reversing decline, obviously, if that's at all possible. From the point of view of equity and access, and now that this morning we're talking about a response to the curriculum and assessment review, and an important area there is EDI, right? So from the point of view of equity and access, we've got to offer ab initio modules because schools no longer offer a range of languages. Ab initio routes level the playing field, which is important for us. And they support students from underrepresented, disadvantaged backgrounds, but also because we live in a multilingual, multicultural country, and I won't stop saying it. It supports that picture of where we are, and it's never too late, as you know very well, to start learning a language. Rebecca, next slide. Thank you. So we've also been talking about reinventing ourselves, and we've talked about different options. And at Durham, we are reinventing the curriculum. Not reinventing really, but yeah, the way we are. And ab initio modules are ideal in this respect because they support interdisciplinarity, flexibility, which is what we need. The exploration of this interdisciplinarity, responding to real-world needs. We've been talking about single language degrees, and we have students still wanting to do that. But it's also important to cater for people who want to learn more than just one language and be citizens of the world, as it were. And also they help shift perceptions of language study from school-like to intellectually rich, which is something that I think is quite important, also from the point of view of recruitment. Next one. Thanks, Rebecca. So flexibility equals opportunity here, and that's all universities need this kind of strategy. So you attract students from different backgrounds, and from traditional modern languages backgrounds. These ab initio modules complement emerging degree modules, and they offer employability advantages when paired with international placements, year-abroad options for global project work. And the next one, please. And from the point of view of the institution, these modules enable us to respond to shifting global interests and also, students' expectations have changed and keep changing. The institutions can also allow the development through these modules of strategic, asset international relations, business readiness for the students. And a model like this aligns with national and institutional goals on global engagement. So this is all that I've said to this university. A bit of the same in this one. But I had to make the case because I didn't think at the time that the multilingual identity of, that is sort of developed through a degree in modern languages was really clear at that place. I think that might be next one, please, Rebecca. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about Durham, and we're still ending the day on a positive, the afternoon on a positive note, even if the figures may tell us otherwise. And Anna certainly wants to end the day on a positive note. And I've asked my head of school whether I could share this data with you. So this is only from the last couple of years, and you'll see that in French we have only one column because it's the first year we've had it as an easier language or fun. So we've got, Rebecca, can you move to the next one so that you can see the figures? So on the one hand, I think it's an excellent idea, and it's what we need for our students and for our institutions to offer initio languages. My question, and I don't want to sound negative, my question is what happens in second year? Why are we losing students? Right? But that's another conversation that may take a few hours. So I think I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to let Anna continue. Yeah? Do you want to come here?
So to follow on from Marcela, we at King's, we have a number, perhaps you can move to the next slide, please, Rebecca. We have a number of languages. So to give you the context, the language degrees exist in French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. I didn't include the Portuguese numbers, they're quite small there, and we are making potentially a number of changes. But then if you look at institution-wide language programs, we have 12 languages. And then if you look at our evening community courses, we have 28 languages. And about 10 years ago, we introduced Spanish and Portuguese ab initio. We have moved away from calling it ab initio because the students didn't know what that meant. And so we obviously use introductory or beginners or something that is easier for them to grasp. And the Spanish, you can see that already in 2020-21, we had 28 students at beginners. But what we've allowed from the beginning is the students to come in either at beginner's level or the equivalent of post-GCSE, i.e. the intermediate. And those numbers are actually quite interesting and strong. So that through that pathway, just in Spanish, you have 5 years ago, 36 students. And if you look at the numbers for this current year, just in Spanish, the numbers have gone up a lot. And you actually have, more like 70 students. And that is on top of the students that come to us on a post-A level. The departments were worried about what ab initio would mean. French started more recently, as the German, Spanish, and Portuguese were the first ones that worked out. French is now on about 7 years. And really, when we introduced French, for example, we had no idea. We're writing all these module specs for 3 students, The first year we introduced French at beginner's level, we had 39 students. And now we are again in 60 to 70 students a year on top of the post-A level. Another interesting thing which we had no idea would happen, you can see, is the split between home and international students, which helps the diversity of the offering. And of course, with international fees, it helps the income that the department is able to generate there. And if you look again at Spanish, for example, this year, the intermediate were 50-50, the introductory level were 46-54%. So even more international students than home students. And that really does help, and it's made a difference, and it's supported. Now, these students are in a variety of degrees. They might be in the modern languages degree, and they might be single honors, French or German or Spanish. Or one of the most popular degree combinations is management and modern languages. And when we created that joint honors program, we were careful with the name, and we put, even though the initiative came from modern languages, management came first. And talking about how things appear in websites or don't appear in websites, it to a certain extent helps to have management as the first thing, and then modern languages. So if you look at all the joint honor degree programs at King's, the first named element of the degree tends to be the department that recruits most strongly, even if it's a 50-50. So if we're going to do history and modern languages rather than modern languages and history. And in the search engines, that helps the students to go for the popular one. If we go at the next slide, please. This is just to give you an idea, because obviously so this is sample results in one language, 1 year. When we introduced ab initio, there was a worry that the students wouldn't perform, that they wouldn't catch up with the A-level students. And at the moment, the students who committed beginners or intermediate, they are taught separately in the language courses in their first year and second year. Then they go abroad in the same placements as the post-A-level students, and in the final year, they're all together. And now that we have enough cohorts who've graduated, we can absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, say they perform just as well, reach the same level as the students who start at A-level. And we've got the figures to prove it. And actually, we just had our assessment board, and for one of our languages, there were 3 prizes given. 2 of the prizes were given to students who started at ab initio. And that is really, wonderful because of what they achieved. And you can also see there again, just in one language, 1 year, a number of students got first, 2 1s to 2. There's a healthy spread. There are some fails, but you could have fails even if the students hadn't started at beginners. So I think it's important to know that to a certain extent, these students are really engaged, really committed. They are making a choice as young adults to study a language to degree level, and they are going to work really hard to achieve the same level. Of course, they come with a number of anxieties. When they know that they're competing with students who've done an A level, of course they're anxious, but they work really hard. And if we look at the next slide, please. So this is to give you now a wider picture. So we do have institutional-wide languages. And again, if we just look at the French, the German, and the Spanish to match, in the top line there, you've got all the numbers of students. So in 24-25, in French, in just the institutional wide language program for undergraduates, because then we have separate ones for MA students and a separate one for PhD students. But at the undergraduate level, we had 374 students altogether doing French in that program outside of the degrees. But then you can see that the highest number, of course, 107 students, are at the beginner's level. So having these, exactly as you were saying in the previous presentations, having these beginners ab initio courses open to all students really enhances what we can do, the reach of languages. And similarly to you, we started Korean, and it's very popular. We're now enrolling students for next September from our existing students before the first year students arrive, and Japanese is actually the most popular language. It's overtaken, French, Spanish, etc. And you can think about it, but obviously we need to adapt, and we need to hopefully offer the languages that the students want to do alongside the more traditional ones that we have in the past. The numbers are, they fluctuate from one year to the other. Obviously, during the COVID years, they went up, but they are still fairly stable. And we look, like every other colleague, to all opportunities to serve students across the college. and the next and I think final slide. So this is just, trying to end on a positive. There are challenges to teaching ab initio students, of course there are. But there are also lots of advantages, and these ab initio students, we work very hard to develop a learning community, for them to really feel they belong. We break down the stereotypes. Languages are for all, not just for a few. There isn't such a thing as, British people aren't good at learning a language. We don't accept that at all. Our brains are all similar. Everybody's capable of learning a language, etc. There can be an increase in confidence because instead of spending so many years learning a language, which is at a much more slower pace, these students progress and they see how they progress more quickly. And that gives them an increase in confidence. We work with international students for peer-to-peer support. So speaking practices are organized, etc. And that makes the international students feel part of the community. They are, they can share what they know, they feel welcomed, etc. Jobs prospects, we know that having a language is important for students who are applying for jobs and who are competing with international students who have multiple languages, developing cultural competences, and remembering, as you were saying, we are in a multilingual environment, multicultural environment, and we need to make the most of that. And then it allows us to be flexible with curriculum design, widen the scope of the languages, that we can offer, the type of programs that we are in. At the moment, we have core modules in about 27 different programs, and then obviously optional modules in most of the programs. Some programs like law school, etc. They don't. It's not possible to do that. And for the programs where it isn't possible, then we offer extra additional credit or not for credit modules, so the students still have the opportunity. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.